As I've mentioned in my previous videos about the church working to make sure the poor stay in poverty, advice from people like Dave Ramsey is out of touch, tone deaf, and doesn't always work. If I were to sum up each piece of advice he gives, it would be the phrase, not necessarily bad, but we're missing a lot. This isn't to say that no one will benefit from his advice. However, we can't ignore systemic and uncontrollable forces that exist. As always, I'm joined by Mothra, the bunny of data science. Feel free to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to hear more about how capitalism is not fit for human consumption. As far as his background, I'll link again the video for Funday Fridays in the description, as there's not much to add to that piece in general. However, I will provide more information about bankruptcy and the research I gathered on bank law. Yes, I'm still salty that I had to read all of them.
I declare bankruptcy!
First, let's start with his anger toward banks and bankruptcy. The Federal Home Loan Bank Act was passed in 1932 in an effort to encourage people to buy homes by providing banks with a source of low-cost funds that could be allocated to mortgages. This was then followed by the Homeowners Loan Act that provided relief to homeowners that were having difficulty paying their mortgages. Over time, between these policies and other economic factors, homeownership in the U.S. went from 40% to 66% by the 1970s. Dave Ramsey heavily benefited from these policies. By having connections from the community and local businesses, he was able to borrow a lot of money without providing a large amount of equity. Then the 80s followed, if you see time as linear, and the Competitive Equality Banking Act of 1987 expanded on this by adding the caveat that these banks could only have a certain amount of outstanding obligations at one time. Also, if banks are going to issue these mortgages, they need to follow proper protocol and have the appropriate equity in order to be backed by the FDIC. That meant that all of the outstanding mortgages Dave Ramsey had on rental properties needed to be satisfied. Eventually, they declared bankruptcy. Ramsey will often explain that bankruptcy was his rock bottom and talk about how awful it was. Part of the reason this works for his audiences is the lack of understanding as to what bankruptcy is and why people file. People fear the unknown, and this works to his advantage. In the US, the two most common types of bankruptcy are Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. I wasn't able to get a clear understanding of which one Dave Ramsey declared, so I'll provide information on both. According to Uscourts.gov, Chapter 7 is, quote, liquidation, the sale of a debtor's non-exempt property and the distribution of the proceeds to creditors, end quote. In less technical terms, repossession of certain property in order to get money to pay people back. While 7 and 13 will both hurt your credit, 7 is usually the one that will hit worse as far as credit score. In a Chapter 7, you are liquidating your assets in order to try and satisfy outstanding debt before they are written off. In a Chapter 13, it's not a liquidation so much as it is setting up a payment plan or structure to pay back the debts or a certain percentage of those debts, usually within 3 to 5 years. However, if they assess your items and you have 6 vehicles when you only need 2, you can be ordered to sell the other 4 vehicles. Certain debts cannot be discharged under bankruptcy, most famously student loan debt. Outside of this, most debt falls into 2 categories, secured versus unsecured. Secured debt is backed by collateral and could be repossessed, such as a car or home. Unsecured debt doesn't require collateral, and it would be things such as credit cards. In general, most people don't lose their car or house because it would be taken away means of income, housing, or other factors. Even so, it's not guaranteed that won't happen. So why do I provide all this information on bankruptcy? Because Dave Ramsey speaks negatively about bankruptcy and heavily intertwines it with the idea that debt is your fault. First, bankruptcy is an arduous process, and it's not fun, but it's not the worst experience in the world for everyone. Second, I would argue that the majority of people that end up filing do so because of situations they often can't control. In the United States, the 2 most common reasons in the US for declaring bankruptcy is medical expenses and job loss. The cost of medical expenses isn't just because the people are uninsured. According to the Northeast Ohio bankruptcy attorneys, 72% of filings due to medical expenses were people that did have insurance. I won't get into the issues with the health insurance, I just want to point out that it's the biggest reason people file. The second most common reason is job loss. While there might be a little bit that can be controlled, we can't control if there's a global event that results in workers being laid off or positions being eliminated entirely. It's also possible to be in a weird place where the amount of debt you may have is deemed too insignificant to support a planned payment in Chapter 13, for example. If you only have student loans or only have a credit card with a maxed out balance of $6,000, it's unlikely bankruptcy will be an available solution. In addition, there's also something to be said about the fact that many people who file need an attorney's office, which means paying attorney fees on top of the debt. You can file as pro se and defend yourself, however, the majority of people filing don't. Some attorneys have a flat schedule fee, while there are also offices that will nickel and dime every penny they can. With all of that information in mind, let's go through Ramsey's points. His first item on the list is to create a budget. This is reasonable, however, many of those with a lower socioeconomic status already budget, and I'll link that video here. It's the caveat to this point that is unnecessary. He states that the budget has to be on paper and can't be on your phone or in a spreadsheet on your computer. For some people, this may work. Saying that it has to be on paper, as if it is some magical, mystic thing that will mysteriously make you able to budget, just shows how out of touch he really is. Many of us keep all our information on our phones. There's apps that can help you budget, plan ahead, schedule payments, and add leftover change to savings accounts. I would argue being able to use your phone as a tool to help you budget is a good thing. Our phones are usually on us all the time, and having peace of mind and knowing that I have automatic payments set up takes a huge weight off my shoulders. If I had to schedule, plan, and mail a payment for my bills each month, I would have tons of late fees. Since I'm able to set up automatic payments and reminders, the work is done for me. Why would I not choose an option that sets me up for success? Why would I not choose an option that will be more up to date than anything I'll keep on paper? I'm lazy and it is inefficient to me to write all of this down. Another piece of this is he says that the average person will have earned $4 to $10 million in their lifetime. It's supposed to come across as an idea that you have enough money, it's just a matter of distributing resources appropriately. Maybe it's just me, but that seems high. Let's break it down. We'll use the lower number of 4 million. Let's say a person who works from 18 until retirement at 65, that's roughly 47 years. That equates to $85,106.38 a year, or $7,092.20 a month. Speaking for myself, I made well under $40,000 a year until I reached my 30s. That means I'd have to pick up the slack in the remaining half and make over 6 figures a year. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median wage in 2022 was $54,132 a year. If we take this amount and multiply it by 47 years, we get a total of $2,544,204. If someone in the audience is listening to this information, they're probably not going to whip out a calculator to determine if the information makes sense. Obviously, wages go up and down during a lifetime, but a difference of about 1.5 million is pretty significant. The idea that he espouses that you'll earn 4 to 10 million in your life is false. The average person is certainly not going to make this. Then if you account for school, illness, major events, this will also drop the amount you make in a lifetime. So as far as this first point, there's a sliver of a good idea, but nothing more. Again, having a budget on paper, not necessarily bad, but we're missing a lot. A better point would be create a budget, find a way to follow it that sets you up for success.
'Cause I have $30,000 in credit card debt. When they call, I tell them I can't pay it back yet. Credit card debt.
I have a very specific disdain towards this idea for a few reasons. One, this item in his list is very often quoted with several Bible verses and feels very much like victim blaming. To his credit, this point is mostly in regards to not buying the newest car or phone. Not necessarily bad, but we're missing a lot. I'm going to skip over the myriad of issues with student loan debt in this section since I will address it later in an entire video on its own. For this video, I want to focus on how Dave vehemently demonizes getting student loans and only paying in cash. While that's a nice idea on the surface, it's just too simplistic. If someone is going to pay for school in cash and not take out student loans, that's great, but there's also something to be said about taking a calculated risk. Most people are aware at this point that the cost of higher education has increased significantly, often for no reason and rarely, if ever, for the benefit of the students. Speaking for myself, there's no way I could have saved up enough to pay for school in cash and obtain a degree in under 10 years. I also went to school for my undergrad in the early 2000s when the mantra of go to school for an education to get a leg up was very strong. Luckily, I was able to graduate in 4 years. What I could not have predicted was the 2008 recession. To finish school just in time to compete with applicants that had education and work experience willing to accept lower wages put many recent graduates at a disadvantage. A degree was a double-edged sword. On one hand, having a 4-year degree would separate me from the applicants that did not have one. However, when I was applying for jobs at places like Target or JCPenney, I would be met with, "Why are you applying for this job? You're so overqualified." Well, Barbara, it isn't because this was my first choice. I worked a variety of jobs and more or less fell into the field I realized I enjoyed. But in order to progress further, most jobs required a master's. Could I have tried pursuing the data science field without this? Yes, however, it would have been incredibly difficult. Even with my master's degree, it was still difficult to find a job in that field, but at least it put me in the running. By taking that risk to get my master's, I was able to find a job that allowed me to live at a reasonable wage and pay off student loans. Dave Ramsey attended college at a time when a part-time summer job could cover most or all of tuition for a year. That is certainly no longer the case. He derides those of us working to get a higher education, but then calls us stupid for needing student loans in order to reach that goal. If he's so bothered by this, he should be addressing colleges and why they keep ramping up tuition instead of attacking students. Students are not the ones setting the rates, it's the college and administration. If Dave is so annoyed by this, maybe he should be ranting about the people in charge and not the students. Another topic that Ramsey needs to update his information on is credit card debt. In the United States, credit card debt has continued to go down. According to Experian, the average credit card debt per family in 2019 was $6,194 and decreased nearly $1,000 by 2021, with the average credit card debt per family being $5,221. Even though credit card use has declined, the interest rates have increased. If we account for income in the image here with the data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the average credit card debt increases as income increases. I think part of the issue is also that Dave Ramsey's advice is mostly geared toward the boomer generation and the type of financial decisions they have had to make. For example, when we look at the average credit card debt by generation, the baby boomers and Generation X are the groups with the highest average debt. It's not millennials, and it's not Gen Z. It also doesn't account for systemic issues within the banking and loan world such as race. As I've mentioned in other videos, those that identify as Black or African American and those that identify as Hispanic are less likely to have a credit card to begin with. Part of this is the acceptance rates, and part of this is cultural. In some communities, there's a stronger push to use cash for transactions instead of credit cards. Giving advice to pay off credit card debt isn't going to help if you have no credit card debt to begin with. Once again, this advice to get out of debt, to stay out of debt, not necessarily bad, but we're missing a lot. A better point would be, avoid debt if possible, understand all of your financial options, and take time to think on it. Work to pay off debt, but don't shut down your life. I'm actually going to end the video here. I'm still recovering from strep throat, and I was a little too ambitious about what I thought I could actually get done. The other 3 points in Dave's sermon will be in the next video. Thanks so much for making it this far. Until next time.
Let's see here. Balloon payment, 37% interest compounded every minute, not understanding the contract fee. And here's your new monthly payment.
That number's so big it has a comma.
Oh, wait, I left out a zero.
Listen, you. When you gave me that money, you said I wouldn't have to repay it till the future. This isn't the future. It's the lousy stinking now.